Subscribe and press the bell icon. हे गाइस, व्हाट्सअप। हम लोग वापस आ गए हैं द स्ट्रेंथ मॉबकास्ट पे। आज हम लोग के साथ है एक और नई गेस्ट होस्ट गौतमम। गौतम, इंट्रोड्यूस योरसेल्फ टू आवर ऑडियंस प्लीज।
Hey, what's going on, guys? First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So, I'm a fitness coach. I started off by doing bodybuilding like everybody who comes into fitness because that's what attracted me into this whole journey. So, I started this probably around like 7 years ago. But even before then, I was training for my sport. I used to play a lot of football, so I was training for that. But for strength training specifically, I started training 7 years ago, and then after that, I thought maybe because in the beginning I think we all have some problems in getting the right information, so we search around all over the internet. We do a lot of trial and errors. So once two years into my lifting, I thought, what, maybe we should start our own a YouTube channel just to put out the right information. And back then, looking at it back then, the right information was still a little bit wrong. That I learned now. But like we started off like that, and then slowly I started getting some online coaching with it. So that's how I slowly went into online coaching. And after that, I started my own apparel company, which was in fitness apparel, with Shreyas, a friend of mine. I'm sure you guys know him as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, so we
actually
both
know
started on
him from
apparel company.
Cheers.
Oh, okay. So I started we started the company together, and then we kind of split the company. He started doing it alone. We're still in good terms. And then after that, I came back. I started doing on the floor training. That's what made me realize a lot more. I started working at the strength and conditioning place. So I started working with a lot of athletes, a lot of IPL players, a lot of during the off season. So mainly what I do is on my online coaching, I train a lot of people into bodybuilding, but on the floor, I train a lot of athletes. So we trained a lot of cricketers during the off season. We also trained a lot of golfers, tennis players, mainly during the off season because on season the teams would take over the strength and conditioning part. And then past some time, I opened my own gym, which was a personal training studio. It dealt with one-on-one strength and conditioning thing. I ran it for 1.5 years, and then later I thought that this is getting too business. A lot of marketing, a lot of. I was less of a coach, and I had more responsibility like paying the rent, paying the employees, and all that stuff. So I sold my gym to a bigger gym, and then I joined the management of that gym, which is also it's a functional training studio. We do train a lot of athletes. We train everybody there. So my online coaching is mainly bodybuilding. My on the floor is mainly strength and conditioning and rehab and stuff like that. So.
Nice. Actually, I know you from like Shreyas Kamath's video. I
Yeah.
have seen a lot of your videos in the past.
Yeah, we started off at YouTube. Like I think so. We lived together for almost 8-9 months in Mangalore. We created a lot of content at the time. So
It was a type of a daily vlog, na?
yeah, it was, yeah. So I like in the beginning, I didn't know what kind of content to put in. Like now, I know that I like doing coaching, and the content that you put towards coaching is very different. Like what you guys are doing, it's a lot of people may not watch it, but the people who watch it, they matter a lot. So we are doing daily vlogging. Even I think at the time, even he was experimenting with a lot of different content. Uh,
Yes,
I
yes.
think that was the time when we actually put a video like with Gurman. I think something the whole thing happened at the point of time. So yeah, it was very funny. Yeah, so we didn't know what we're doing.
Guru Mom. Yes.
Yeah,
So we'll start with the questions, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So first question is from me, like how to become a better coach. Like that's a uh, what do you say, main question every coaches have
Yeah.
like right now, because they think they don't are they they think if they could do something to for be like for being the better part.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. So I think the number one point to be a better coach is you actually have to start caring about your clients more, and that's one thing that I find a lot of people not doing because like if you see like definitely there are good coaches like who actually want to provide good content for their clients,
But there's also a part of people that if you see at a lot of gyms, for them, coaching is just a part to earn money to source their bodybuilding or to source their athletic career,
Mhm.
as opposed to being the other way around. So I think point number one is like actually caring about your client, and the second thing is that I feel that coaches have to become more inclined towards science, as opposed to following methods that work for them or that work for someone else. And also, one trend that I see a lot of people doing is they get affiliated to one type of thinking. Like, for example, if someone likes low carb, they put everybody on low carb. As a coach, you should not be biased. You should learn to respect everything, and everything works. And you just have to pick what is the right thing there and put. Same thing goes for for training as well. If someone is a powerlifter, they start writing programming. There's more towards low reps, more towards like that powerlifting pattern, and bodybuilders tend to write programs more towards like 12 15 near close to failure patterns, and they don't uh, think about all of the other aspects. So that's one thing that I
Okay. So from this question, I will ask you about your experience in powerlifting and bodybuilding.
so I've always liked powerlifting a lot.
Yeah.
One reason for that is because if you're natural, right, you kind of hit a plateau as a bodybuilder and things become very slow, and the only thing that matters is increasing your strength. So if you have the mindset of like when you start loving to develop strength, then you kind of get away from that whole of looking, trying to look better as opposed to trying to lift more. So I think
Yeah.
powerlifting puts people in a better mindset, I feel, as opposed to bodybuilding. And also, but for some reason, I am not able to go towards powerlifting. I would recommend someone powerlifting, but for some reason I just like training with machines. That's just me. But if you ask me what is better, I would say go to powerlifting. That's what I would say. But
Actually, I've seen one of your competition videos on Shreya's channel.
uh
The competition was in Mangalore, I guess.
I oh okay. I didn't. I
Uh,
competed in Chennai. Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
oh, yeah, you competed in Chennai. Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
drove there,
they
I guess.
traveled. Yeah, they traveled.
Yeah, they make the travel vlog. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It was an interesting
that was
video.
actually that was the first idea which I got, that I can do a vlog where I can shoot
Powerlifting.
powerlifting competitions and then post on YouTube.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Shiraz Kamath was the first guy who made that powerlifting vlog, and then I created that whole concept and made a lot of videos on it.
That's good. That's good because I think in a lot of ways, Shreyas was the first person that a lot of people saw on YouTube because he just came like
Yeah, actually,
yeah, he's very old
Yeah,
YouTube. Yeah.
yeah. I even remember he
I
used to like fill his water bottle with lots of BCAAs, and he used to just do a lot of stuff. Like he
Yeah,
was
yeah,
crazy back then.
yeah.
I guess we should get Shreyas Kamath on this sometime.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is.
So one question, what kind of athletes do you take in for training and stuff?
It that depends. If I'm working for the gym, then I really have no say. Like only thing that I refrain myself from doing is people who are injured because I'm not qualified enough to do that. Right? So maybe post rehab to a little bit, to an extent, if I'm comfortable handling them. But generally, the clients that I train are people who want physique transformation. Like they may be either into they want to compete, or some of them just want to change their body composition or the way they look. That is like one thing that I'm very comfortable handling with, and the other is training for sports. So I like to take in clients who are more towards football, who are more towards tennis and not cricket, the other sports that demand a lot of like agility and all that stuff. But I think I am not very comfortable training powerlifters for some reason because
Okay.
that's because I don't want to mess with some. I want to learn it really well until and unless I can like put it on someone else. So yeah, that's something I'm not comfortable with. So,
Okay. So there's another
Nice.
question which I can ask you.
yeah, yeah.
So what kind of injuries do athletes normally face, and how do you go about it?
So
Like mostly footballers and tennis players.
So
Yeah.
it's ACL tear mainly, but one component that lacks a lot in one thing that we noticed when we train athletes is they only train in one plane of movement. They completely forget lateral movement and they don't train for it. but actually the field, like for example, it's squat, split squats, any kind of movement that they typically do, it's all trained in one plane, right? We completely neglect the other plane. But while in movement, most injuries happen there, and that is why ACL is a very common injury that people have. So, like when we write a program, we make sure that we add all components of all directions of training. So that's one thing that ACL and also like shoulder injuries are pretty common with regards to tennis players. But that's about what we mainly see.
Tennis elbow.
Tennis elbows. This thing and generally, if there are people who run marathon, they always have some kind of knee, like it's just an overuse injury, and like there's nothing pretty much that you can do about it. So
Overuse injury basically.
yeah.
So I
The
used to
most
play
tech-
football.
most injuries that you see, the most injuries that you see, do it occur from having improper technique, or what could be the other reason?
So if we see injuries that are coming with general population clients, 100% it's improper technique. It's for example, like see one of the basic problems that I feel when I look at clients is even if someone has trained for 2-3 years, they still don't know how to squat right. They still don't know how to brace. They still don't know how to keep their back neutral. They still don't know how to engage their entire body or create tension before they deadlift. And but then they have built enough muscle to pull heavy weights. And the problem here is because they can actually pull heavy weights, the risk of injury is much higher. And the reason for it is nobody follows like basic progressions. Like we think, squat. Like if you go to a gym, the client just starts back squatting. They don't do goblet squats. They don't do box squats. They don't learn the squatting pattern in itself, but they start doing the highest progression and they start there. So I think that is where the problem arises with the general population client, I feel.
Yeah.
And what do you think are the common, injuries which could be easily avoided in the gym?
Any kind of lower back strain, I think that can very easily be avoided in the gym if someone just learns how to keep their core tight, which is like as simple as that, but just people forget it. And for example, in our gym, like on the walls, we write brace. It's brace is everywhere. So
nice.
like in a day when I coach people, I at least tell brace 50 times. So, but I think this is like if you see people don't do that enough. I think coaches don't do that enough, and that's very simple, but yet I think it's very effective.
And have you treated any powerlifter recently for rehab work?
No. Yeah, I haven't gotten into any powerlifting rehab work.
Okay.
But I did train recently a powerlifter who.
So could you tell our viewers some of the?
Yeah, go on, Vedant. Go on.
I'm sorry.
Veda.
No. You were saying something.
No. I was telling that I recently trained a powerlifter who wanted to do a bodybuilding show.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, so how was
Nice.
his journey?
Okay.
So it was very hard for me to actually not make him lift heavy towards the end of it all, because he was all about wrapping his sleeves and he's like, no, I want to squat. So because like he was on very low calories towards the end of the, like obviously 3 weeks out, it was very low calories, but he still wanted to do SBD. He still wanted to do these,
Compound exercise.
yeah. So it was very hard for me to actually make him do exercises.
Leg presses. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Make him do such stuff that demand less form, because why unnecessarily go put into an extent where he may get injured so close.
Yeah. Yeah, Vedant, go on.
Yeah. So I was talking about the in these
Vedant?
common injuries.
You're lagging.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, good now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're audible, but sometimes you're lagging.
Okay. So Gautam, my question was that what are some prehab work or exercises which a person can do which will prevent these injuries or common mistakes?
Okay. So I think definitely, like in terms of preventing injury, there are like I feel there are three muscle groups that are very vital. Number one would be your glutes. So again, that's one of the most undertrained parts. So I think definitely people have to start training their glutes more. And second thing is their core. Like people just like they don't train the core in a functional way. For example, like crunches is not a functional way to train your core, as opposed to like isometric holds, what the core is supposed to do, you know. And also, people just train in just like anti-extension, which is like crunches or planks and all this stuff. They don't train the other element, which is anti-rotation, like pile of presses.
Pile of press, yeah.
Exactly. So they only train in that one direction. So like, it's not an entire functional training method for the core. And the other thing that I also noticed is lower traps. And I like when we take like posture analysis for a lot of people, like they have like very tight upper traps and very lower traps because of which their the scapula is like kind of completely upward rotated. So they have a lot of restriction in terms of mobility. When they do shoulder presses, they're not able to do it without shrugging. So I think lower traps are also a great should also be a muscle that has to be improved by doing like something like YTIs or prone trap raises, something like that. So
Basically rhomboids.
Rhomboids and lower traps, yeah. Because like a lot of people when I see shoulder presses, they kind of shrug their way up. They don't press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scapula is
That's
not
a very
stabilized.
common mistake.
Yeah, exactly. There's no scapular rotation.
Yeah.
So
And I think
one more
learning
point.
scapular control is also very important.
I couldn't hear that.
I said learning scapular control or even pelvis control can be very beneficial for a powerlifter or even a gym goer.
Yeah, very beneficial. I think they're very important body parts. I think that is where that mind-muscle connection actually comes in and actually matters. Is when you know that you're pushing to your scapula or not. So I think these are things that
Especially while doing bench press, I focus on that. Because when it's not there, I feel some pain in my shoulders. Like what the fuck is?
For sure. And also like you powerlifters generally lift a lot of load, right? So it's like yeah.
Actually, it's not like lot of load, but it's like efficient way to lift. We create some efficient point A to point B lifts. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah.
When you see some powerlifter lift, it's like not he's strong. He's just
More efficient.
using it more efficient. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like not a weightlifter basically.
Mm-hmm.
Weightlifters, it's all technique based, and he needs the strength also to move the weight, and it's a longer range of motion also.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
So from here, I would like to ask you a question here.
Yeah.
So what are your training principles like? Like basic principles, like.
Okay, so when I'm, let me talk about a regular gym goer. So one of my basic principles is I highly I make sure that especially with online coaching, the moves are not very progressed. Until unless I'm very confident that the client can actually like brace, has good lifting technique, I make sure I put them on a very rigorous movement because that still produces muscle stimulus and that still can give the required results or whatever. So one thing is I put safety up top. Second thing is I make sure that the warm-ups definitely include one exercise for the glutes, one exercise for the lower traps, and one exercise for the core, either anti-rotation or anti-extension. And second thing is I always go by like 4 weeks of volume increase and 1 week of deload. And generally, with me, the volume increase comes from not just the number of sets. Obviously, the load also goes up a little bit, but I prefer pushing number of sets a little bit higher when I write the program. And also, I very rarely ask someone to push till failure. So generally, I like to stay under like 8 or 9 RP. That's what I generally like to put any client under. So I would say these are small things. And also, like I add a lot of multi-directional work for anybody, especially if it's a general population client.
Nice. So, what progression scheme do you use? Like linear progression, DUP, or something other?
I do linear.
Or mixture of all. Yeah.
Linear progression.
Linear progression. Okay, nice. So, Vedant, do you have any questions on this?
Yeah. So, Gautaman, are you currently training any bodybuilding aspirants?
Yeah. I am. So I'm training 2 natural bodybuilders who want to come. Maybe the ICN is going to come up. They're saying maybe December or Jan. They're not sure, but we're just getting started early. And I'm training one guy who is not natty. So he doesn't know when the show is. So we're currently kind of doing like a maintenance phase. So that's
So,
Okay.
how different is enhanced bodybuilding as compared to natural bodybuilding?
I would say the harder part when it comes to enhanced bodybuilder is getting the conditioning. I believe that it's much easier to put get low body fat percentages on natural bodybuilding client than on an enhanced bodybuilding client because it's just too many variables, and it may not even be the problem may not even be the fat, it may be the water retention and all of that. So that is one thing. And in terms of training, you, during a cut, it is much more safer to kind of push the training up on the enhanced athlete as opposed to natural athlete. So natural athlete, I always like recommend like lowering the volume very low because it's very hard to build muscle if you're natty. So as opposed to like yeah. And I think you just have a little bit of more room to maybe build a little bit more muscle if you're enhanced, depending on what your calories are and how much you take and stuff like that.
And how long does it take for an average prep, from starting the cut and to be on the stage?
You're talking about the cutting phase alone, right?
Yeah.
Ideally,
Preparing for the stage.
So generally, like I think you can start at let's say around 20% of body fat. If someone is starting at 20% of body fat, I would say 4-5 months is a good place to be at for someone who's natural. And for someone who's like enhanced, it depends really on how much time that they are willing to take me in as a coach for. It can be done at a very rapid phase as well, but I think 3 months is enough for them to get down to where they want to be.
So can a natural bodybuilder compete multiple times in an year?
Maybe 2 shows, 2 shows or 3 shows, because but again, I wouldn't recommend a natural bodybuilder unless and until he's reached his peak, as in like he's reached his a muscle building peak. Then maybe he can like compete year round. But until then, I would say like it should be like 1 year of competing and 1 year of just like actually growing. And then on the time when you compete, you do like 2-3 shows, and then you take a complete year off to just build muscle. So.
Okay. So I have one question.
Yeah.
Is periodization necessary for a bodybuilder?
Yes and no. Bodybuilders can easily get away with like not being periodized, but I think it is still necessary. It is very necessary, especially if you're natural, for sure. Because also periodization becomes important if you're just trying to build that one lagging body part, or you think that you want to bring up your legs. Then periodization becomes more important. But it just gives a little bit more structure to like you to increase volume. So I think it is necessary, at least. Even if you don't change the program very often, I think some kind of 4 weeks on, 1 week off is kind of necessary.
Okay, makes sense.
And as a coach, do you use powerlifting exercises in the prep of your bodybuilding athletes in off season or in season?
Yeah, I do. That's a very good question. I do. So like he said, for example, when let's say I have a client who has a long off season. So sometimes I may run a couple of cycles of like just strength cycles where we kind of try to build strength, so that translates into more volume when you're trying to push for hypertrophy. So during these cycles, we do use powerlifting methods, like trying just so we can increase the strength for a couple of months and then get back to creating more volume. This is something that also happens with like athletes when you're on their off season, where we actually want to produce more power or produce more hypertrophy. So strength actually plays a very important role. So on cycles where strength is periodized more or strength is prioritized more, powerlifting training methods are generally used.
And so as you approach the competition even closer and the weight goes down, how do you change the programming then?
So then the programming becomes something close to 7 RPE, or maybe it depends on how low on calories they are, but I would say 7 RPE. And I generally like to make it very low on reps. So closer to the show, it'll be like maybe 6 sets of 5 reps, just so because we keep the strength higher and also not push till failure at the same time. So
Mhm.
I
So,
like
so
more
when
reps
when
schemes.
okay, because he's
And so
on
you
more calories, so you
focus
try
more
to
on
manage between.
execution.
What?
Do you focus more on execution or getting the volume in?
I make the program in such a way that execution is not a hard thing to do
Mhm.
when it's closer to the show, because like why put another risk factor in there? If I can get away with like giving them leg presses, I would do that, as opposed to giving them like a complete squat.
Yeah. So last time on the show, on the podcast, we talked about SFR, stimulus to fatigue ratio, like which exercise is less fatiguing but gives you the maximum results for that that muscle group.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you use this technique, or how your approach is for choosing
So
a right exercise?
yeah, so kind of along the same lines, because I think, but again, there are studies like for hypertrophy or for this muscle stimulus which say that hey, Bulgarian split squats is better than squatting, or sometimes leg press is better than squats because it does have more time on retention and stuff like that. So yeah, like when it's pure and pure hypertrophy, this is the method that we generally go for. Use exercises that demand less execution, and we can just focus more on pushing more volume in.
And
Okay, so
how do you
Gautam,
overcome muscle imbalances or
Uh,
muscle weaknesses?
so muscle weakness, I would say, like only when we have enough time in the off season can it actually be worked on. If someone says I have 3 months for the show, but I have weak legs, like nothing can be done at this point.
Hmm.
So when we have enough time, definitely a couple of cycles of the training cycle, couple of months of the training cycle would be prioritized more on that particular muscle group by pushing more volume and more frequency as well. So generally, I push more frequency in, and that in turn creates more volume, as opposed to just giving it on one day.
And how much experience do you think a person should have before the first competition?
I would say at least like 3 to 4 years of lifting, 3 years minimum. If they are
And
like if
Mhm.
they're active, and I think if someone wants to become enhanced, they should at least be lifting for like 5 6 years, and then they should consider taking something, because like otherwise it's just like you've not even reached your potential, and it's not the best bang for buck.
Yeah, because we can see a lot of teenagers, going to the dark side
Oh
when
yeah,
they just start, just start training.
like
Like in
I
lift.
like in the gym that I generally go and train at, which is like a bodybuilding gym. There was
Mhm.
this client who was like completely obese, who was like 140 kilos when he came in, and like he has no work, he has no training experience, and the trainer just started giving him like something like a train or something like that. So it's just
oh
like
my God.
it's horrible in terms of like how and kids are like fearless these days. They don't care. They're like so fearless.
That's bad.
Yeah.
But I don't think so that 5 years will be sufficient to get or to reach your maximum potential.
I don't think so. I don't think it's enough. But I'm just thinking like before 5 years, they should
At
not even
least
think about it.
at least to build a basic base, it will be fine. But to reach a maximum potential, I think 10 to 12 years will be a good time span, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And also, one more reason behind this is when they see only when like, because a lot of people think that when they start taking when they become enhanced, things are going to get easier, but they forget that it is just another added component. It is nothing is going to get easier. Things are going to get very hard from now on. So only when someone has actually worked for 5 years, they are taking this entire journey seriously, and they will have the discipline to actually follow through with all of the protocols, all of the testing, and all of that stuff. So I think or like you said, I think they should actually wait for more, but they should not even get the thought before 5 years. Is what I feel.
Yeah. So last time you said that TUT, like you said something about TUT. So I have one question regarding it.
Yeah.
So do you think that TUT can help you build muscle faster?
Than the normal tempo.
Yeah.
So like the time on attention is on top of the training pyramid. Like
Yeah.
it's like on the most top. So I think if
It's less,
if you
yeah, effective.
if your volume is not in place, if all the other bottom things are not in place, it's maybe like having something like an ECA like EAS to help you. Like it's and also the study in terms of TUT is like so like on and off, because there are also a lot of other components that go down. Like I'm not able to get this calculation right, but a couple of years ago, like I had to do a seminar where we actually wrote down the time under tension, and we actually found out that if you kind of overdo your tempo, that brings down the volume a lot, because you'll have to actually, you won't be able to lift enough load, and that kind of starts to become counterproductive. So I think TUT is good to when everything is in right, and also if you increase the tempo a lot, it is not good, because it
Okay.
brings the volume down.
Okay. And when should a normal athlete or a normal gym goer should implement using supersets or giant sets?
Like it depends. For example, like at the place where I work in function training, we kind of start them off with supersets immediately. Like even the first couple of weeks, just because like we do stuff like we do low trap work and then immediately put them on bench press, because like kind of it makes sure you have like good low trap activation, all of that. So I think it's very relative of how you look at supersets. If supersets is a way to increase intensity, then they should wait for a long period of time. But if supersets are just a way to make things more efficient and work under a smaller period of time, then any time is fine.
Okay. And what do you think about partial reps? Partial reps for fatiguing the muscle, basically. Like before starting side lateral, most of the guys, which I know, they try to like use a 15 kg or 20 kg dumbbells in a side lateral using partial, and then halfway movement they will lower the weight and they'll do the top side laterals. So what do you think about that kind of supersets using partial reps?
If it is just to get the intensity up a little bit, then yeah, that's all right. But I generally put partial reps on top, or like at the end of the, for example, on their week 3 or week 4, where I want to push the volume really high. Once a week, I would ask someone to go to absolute failure by doing partial reps. So,
Okay.
but again, I think this is also very relative. Like this comes under like the TUT thing.
Okay. Also, and what do you think about the blood restriction training? The stuff we use in for bicep training and thighs training, where we restrict the blood to get better
Blood flow,
pumps.
BFR.
BFR.
BFR, BFR.
I think definitely BFR has a place, but also BFR is like if you kind of make it too tight and restrict too much of blood, it's a problem. So you can't do BFR for a long time. But also BFR, like if someone who has like a joint issue, or someone who has like an elbow problem, BFR kind of helps with them by kind of reducing the load. So like I think it may help with someone who has like an overuse injury by making the exercise intense at a lower load or something like that. But
Okay. Okay.
Nice.
So Vedant,
So I have
any questions?
some
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
So, do you think supplements are necessary for like bodybuilding or any functional training kind of thing stuff?
no, I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary.
Like
Like
like any supplements, like any supplements.
maybe the only thing that I would say is worth it is creatine. Creatine is
Got
worth
your
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, like I said, creatine. Yeah, creatine is worth it. But I think like apart from that, the protein it doesn't make a much of difference if you can eat enough meat.
Yeah.
The other things is just like icing on the cake. So I think creatine is the one thing that can actually make a difference.
Gautam, that was a trick question. You passed it. Congratulations. So now we can move on to Vedant's question.
Yeah, so
Functional
Gautam,
training.
can you talk more about functional training, like what exercises are involved and how it differs from the normal training?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people have different thoughts about functional training. People think that functional training is like flipping a tire, or like functional training is doing battle ropes. But functional training is anything that makes it easier for you to do your regular life. So in a way, even squats are functional training, because you're building enough strength to not get injured, right? So one thing that would come in functional training is there should be equal emphasis in all the 5 aspects of different types of lifting, which will be push, pull, hinge, squat, and carry. So we put focus on all of these things. So there should be enough pushing movements equal to pulling movements. There should be enough amount of carrying movements, because That's how you build your core. The functionality to build your core, and there's hinging and the squat. So this is how we write generally functional training programs. Not like in our gym, you don't even do the try. That's not functional training, but people think it's functional training. So like, when was the last time anybody flipped the tire in their life? So.
Okay.
So from this functional training, I'm thinking of some sort of a strongman training. Is it right? Strongman training is also functional training.
It depends on which. Yeah, it is true. It is functional towards being a strongman. Like if you're
Because they also have this 5 aspects of training, no?
Yeah, correct, yeah. So like, for example, if I were to program things for a general population client, it would be something like farmers carry to build their core. It will be a lot of anti-rotation work. It will be a lot of anti-extension work. It won't be focused towards one particular thing. If I can sum it up, it won't be focused on hypertrophy. It won't be focused on anything else.
So, do you think a deadlift is more functional movement than squat? Because I think we can, pick one thing up from the ground more than, just squat in a lateral plane.
Exactly. Deadlift is a hinge, and like hinge is one of the most important functional patterns. So I think, yes, in a way, deadlift is more functional than squatting, but also squatting is kind of essential just to build muscle. But what he's saying is totally right. Like the hinge pattern is very important because that's how one should pick up anything from the floor.
Yeah, but I think that's the most underutilized tool, hinging.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's why people into the back.
Yeah, I think that one of there can be 2 underlying reasons because the cause of back injuries. One could be improper hinging, pulling from just the back instead of hinging from the hips, and second could be improper bracing, not able to produce intra-abdominal pressure.
Correct, 100%.
I've seen somewhere, I've listened this, like, don't hinge and squat your like, if you want to carry something, just squat it and pick it up. Don't hinge. What do you think? Is it bullshit or?
I think it is dependent on the height of the person. To be very honest with you, if you're
mostly in airline companies they do this.
What?
Mostly in airline companies, they ask people to just squat and pick the stuff up. Do not hinge.
Maybe it's because they want them to be a little bit more safer. Because like hinging is also a movement pattern, right?
So squat is more safer than hinging.
I would recommend someone to do a hinge, but like at least if you don't know how to hinge, just squat.
Yeah. Okay.
And
because there's so many.
Yeah, Aniket, go ahead.
So because like there are so many injuries that can happen in lower back.
Yeah.
That's why people refrain from hinging.
Yeah. Correct.
And
so Vedant, go ahead.
Gautam, as you said, you also involve push and pull movements. Do you agree with the notion of having 2 pull exercises whenever you do one push exercise, to ensure that you have healthy shoulders?
I would I would agree with that, but I would also say if someone is already not internally rotated, if someone is fine, then I would kind of make it equal, and I would make their shoulders more healthier by doing a lot of external rotation work and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the reasons why we kind of do. I wouldn't say it's a posture analysis because every posture is is their own, right? But also we see we take a look at weak muscle groups by looking at the scapula and things like that. How the scapula is, because for most people scapula is completely upward rotated, which kind of suggests that they are not they don't do enough pulling movements, and also same with the shoulders being internally rotated and all this stuff. But again, as you said, more pull is always better. It cannot go wrong.
Yeah.
So Deva, do you have any questions for Gautam?
Yes. So are there any special tips for our viewers who are into natural bodybuilding? Any nutrition tips you can give?
One thing that I would say is natural bodybuilding is a very, very long game, and
right.
And people should actually realize that before they even look at posters and think like they have to become like them. It is a very, very long game.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if you want to be a natural bodybuilder, you should actually love lifting. It should not be the other way around. Natural bodybuilding is just an outcome of you liking to lift, right? So I think people should acknowledge that it is going to take them 3 to 4 years to actually see a decent, nice, good physique. And second thing is, people shouldn't be very too afraid of carbohydrates. Like, they, like carbohydrates are really like I wouldn't. I think there's a very misconception about carbs, saying that high carbs are very bad for you. I think high carbs, and in bodybuilding, I think high carbs are a very good thing.
Okay.
Like you need
So
carbohydrate as a source of energy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
so
And
there are
good.
yeah. So there are many categories in bodybuilding, and people often fail to choose the right category, which can actually help them like get higher in their rank as athlete. So
Yeah.
what do you think about this?
Uh, if you are a natural bodybuilder, like I would say, definitely you should try competing at the actual bodybuilding class, not the classic physique or not men's physique, the actual
Yeah.
weight category, and then you can take a look from there.
But
Because,
what about that athlete has a thicker waist and he's like a box shaped
oh, like that.
athlete. He
Okay.
doesn't have that V taper shape
Mm-hmm.
physique. Then I guess what will he do? Like because some guys have potential to be a greater athlete in a men's physique than in open bodybuilding because open body bodybuilding demands you to be as huge as possible and carry as mass as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Classic will ask you for a maintained physique where you are equally proportionate and you have aesthetic physique. Then in men's physique, they will ask you for only broader shoulders, small waist, tight abdominal and core,
Mm.
and you don't need to actually focus on your lower leg. But yeah, legs are like very important. But in that perspective, what will you say?
So I think like what you're saying is right. Like if you're someone who's like who has a very small waist, you would actually start doing really well in actually all classes.
Yeah,
But if someone who has like a blocky waist or something like that, you should prefer to go into bodybuilding. But also, I would say that this is very tricky because you'll also need the judges' feedback for this. Like
yeah,
it's because right now it's very complicated because everybody competes in everything. The same person competes in all these three things, and also like, for me personally, like I think men's physique would be easier for me to do, but I just love to pose. So
yeah.
I wanted a classic physique. So
I
if
saw your photos. I saw
yeah.
your photos, and your lower body development is like totally insane. Your striations and your separations on the legs are like totally insane.
Thanks a lot.
So
So
I think that if you just went into men's physique, that will be like a total disadvantage for you because you won't be able to showcase your main component of the body, right?
agreed. Yes. Yes. Agreed.
Because if you see your arms are totally bigger than your shoulders doesn't actually catch an eye before I see your physique. The
Mm.
first thing I see in your photos it was biceps and your legs. So I feel if a men's physique competitor is like preparing, he should be focused on how big his shoulder are and how small his waist is.
Agreed. Agreed.
Is
Yes.
that
Totally agreed.
yeah?
Yeah. Agreed. Yes. And also, like, if you're someone who's just like kind of you don't like to train legs, you like taking more pictures on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all men's physique people are like that, but again, like if you're competing kind of recreationally, maybe like or if you want to give it a try, men's physique is a good class to be at. It
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vedant, say.
Yeah, so I was saying, Gautaman, do you prefer a natural bodybuilder to go from rounds of bulking and cutting, or just adding on to small amount of muscle throughout the year?
I, for the most part, I would say try to stay very close to maintenance calories, not
Mm-hmm.
not go unnecessarily overboard. But sometimes there may be a reason for someone to go completely overboard. Like when you're like actually when you're actually plateaued, maybe you just want to do 1 month of like whatever, and then maybe that's a good idea. But for the most part, I think it is good to stay under your maintenance calories. And also one of the things that I would also suggest for natural bodybuilders is this. Uh, Always if you think that you're going overboard, it is good to do a mini cut because as your there have been studies for this also. As your body fat kind of goes up, you are actually more prone to storing more fat than building muscle. So it's always kind of good to be somewhere around like 15% to 20% body fats, hovering somewhere around there, because that is where you'll actually be potentially putting on more muscle. So you'll kind of want to cut back, do a mini cut, again stay somewhere there. So that's something that I would suggest.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what do you think is that one aspect, regardless of training, nutrition, or recovery, which lags in most gym goers or most athletes? What is that one?
Hello?
Vedant?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Consistency.
consistency. Yeah, because like
Consistency.
people are very quick to move between things. Like like nobody even does like 4 weeks of training program anymore. They're like they want to do 1 week this, 1 week that. They see something on bodybuilding.com. They see something that favorite bodybuilder said. They'll buy Kai Green's $1 book. Like they keep moving.
Yeah,
They keep moving
that
from
was a good strategy actually to sell.
I swear, dude, it's so I was just calculating that. So even if he has like so many followers that even if he sold to half his followers, he actually would have made like more than $1 million on that one particular day. That's a really
Yeah.
good strategy.
Yeah, and
Nice,
that was
nice
actually a
idea.
good move as a businessman.
Yeah, 100%. He's a good businessman.
Kai Green is a
Yeah.
businessman right now.
Yeah.
Because most of the guys don't praise Olympian champions that much than Kai
Yeah,
Green.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
He's the uncrowned king.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So I have one question for you.
Yeah.
So how important do you think posing is for the competitive athletes or anyone who is looking to gain muscle faster? Because I personally feel that posing will help you understand your body more, improve that mind muscle connection more. So what's your take on this?
So I think for like a bodybuilding athlete, it is 100% important. It is very important because if you don't know to show things, then like there's no point in competing. But for the general population, yes, what you're saying is right. Learning to do a lat spread will kind of get more mind muscle connection and all of that. But also it depends on client to client because some people are like they kind of start fitness or something because they're kind of insecure about their bodies, right? So they're not actually there to pose yet. But again, if they are, like I would be all for it. They should pose because it's a good way to. You also feel good, right? Seeing what you've
Yeah.
actually built. So
Showcase, basically.
yeah, exactly.
Showcase what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you
And
think that a
Gautam,
powerlifter can transition? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so Gautaman, I was asking, we had a guest last week who said that a bodybuilder should be doing his, movements in the way he's going to pose. For example, if he's going to do a front bicep, then he should be doing more of a, high cable curl so that he can practice that movement and that contraction more. So what is your opinion on that?
So it's if that particular exercise actually helps you to get more muscle stimulus, it makes sense. But if it doesn't, then it's just like I think you're wasting your time because like the you can always if you have enough muscle and if you know to recruit muscle fibers, if you're big enough to have all those muscles, I think the posing will kind of come. Because the number one point here is hypertrophy. How you're going to pose is kind of the other thing. I think hypertrophy like kind of triumphs that. So we should always pay more attention to what actually provides more muscle stimulus. What is the most efficient exercise? Because you should not be wasting your time in the gym because we don't have like forever to be in the gym, right? So that's my take on it.
Yeah. So Deva, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So how can a powerlifter transit to a bodybuilding what is it side?
Phase.
Add 3 more reps to your workout program.
Actually, I do that, bro. I try to squat in a rep range of 8 to 10 reps.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, but I
Yeah.
also think that, like, I think, like, if a powerlifter wants to transition to bodybuilding, like, provided, they are, like, under the right weight category and stuff like that, it's a very strong move for them because they will have the tendency to put on, like, muscle so much faster because they've had so much of strength built in them. So that's a good thing. And I think,
Do you think
I can just, go on. Yeah, please go on.
do you think that powerlifters build more denser muscle than a bodybuilder in the early phase?
I think in the early phase, it's kind of similar for everybody.
Okay.
in the beginning. But again, like I said, it's more functional. So you're doing very close to what you should actually be doing, and it's also about you're kind of building a central nervous system to recruit so much of muscle fibers to push that kind of weight, as opposed to what a bodybuilder would do. So I think it's training a lot of other things also, because a powerlifter is not just about how much muscle he has; it's about how efficiently he can recruit all of those for that one particular lift as well. So
Yeah.
But I have a question over here. But don't you think bigger muscle will move bigger weights?
for sure, yeah, for sure.
So from that question, I'll transition into my next question. How can a bodybuilder transition into powerlifting?
It's a very point number one. He has to focus more on fixing his form. Definitely,
Technique.
because yeah, they should fix their form. They should actually because see, powerlifting is technique, right? It's
Yeah.
you're just based. Technique plays an important role. So I think they should spend enough amount of time to learn these techniques from scratch. Take the ego out, and then, like you said, they can actually, like, if they start again, like, training to recruit all these muscle fibers, training their nervous system and all these things, they can become good at powerlifting as well, for sure.
Yeah. I think
But I
bodybuilders
think
usually muscle up.
Eva? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think bodybuilders usually muscle up all the lifts rather than a powerlifter will
Yeah.
use his perfect leverage
Yeah,
and he'll just lift the weight.
yeah,
And I
agreed.
think using leverages will be more efficient than just muscling up the
100%.
any kind of lift.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like
But
sometimes
sometimes
it's so funny to see bodybuilders do cleans. Like it'll be like
Yeah.
actually,
They are
yes.
just doing hammer curls, bar hammer curls.
yeah.
I've seen some powerlifters do cleans also. It's horrible.
Yeah, because their shoulder mobility sucks, bro.
Yeah, that, and also
Actually,
technique as well,
they've
right?
been in such
Yeah,
position
technique.
like
Yeah.
they've been benching the whole
Technique is
life.
more
The
technical
pec,
than bench powerlifting.
yeah.
And
But
I
I've
I
think
tried
never
Olympic
faced
lifting.
yeah, at a
faced
given
that
point of time,
issue.
yeah, Deva.
Bro, you're just a
Yeah, yeah.
beginner right now. You're just a kid right now.
Okay, bro. Yeah, Vedan, go
So,
ahead.
Gautamam, I have one more question.
Yeah.
Like, how can we market ourselves like in a better way for the clientele to know there's this service also for like bodybuilding to powerlifting? Any coaches out there who can use this video as a
Okay. So I think I would ask them to not make the mistake that I did, or like a lot of people did, because I think in terms of social media, you should kind of figure out what you actually want to be. You can't be everything, right?
yeah.
Because like it is okay to be influenced by other people. Sometimes we see these coaches putting out really good content, right? And we think, oh, I want to do that. And then you also see someone else putting content that gives you a lot of followers, like maybe like shirtless pictures, something like that. So, and you want to do that also. You can't be a mixture of everything. So I think you should kind of understand what you actually want to be right in the beginning. Like it may be something like a coach, or you have your fitness influencer, and the content completely differs. As a coach, your primary motive is not to get more followers; it is to get more clients. So every person who's going to be following you, they should you should appeal to them in a way that they may actually hire you. It's not about like random people giving you likes, right? So I think the type of content matters a lot. So in the beginning, you may not get traction, but you keep putting stuff that you want that you that are the right people, you know. So I think
Yeah, yeah.
consistency matters a long. Put the same type of content that you think that you want people to see, you know. And
That's a nice one actually.
But Gautaman, there is this thing that people will have a mentality like if I am getting all these resources for free and I'm learning from them, I could coach myself as well.
so that is true, but I think what people come to you for is for your time, you know.
Hmm.
No, I think it's not for information. Like sometimes, even though everything is there, like there's everything on the internet right now, but they still want your time. I think what they're going to pay you for is your time actually. So I think putting more content and putting content that will actually help them a lot is just a way to develop more trust. So I don't think that will backfire on you, because there's a lot of other things that can always come. Because nowadays, like companies are even looking at Instagram to hire people. So I don't know what might happen. So I think quality content matters a lot.
How can we grow as a community? Like, that's a big question over here, because we don't see so many powerlifters like who are willing to like
Share
have
information.
some knowledge consumed, yeah, share information, or willing to like consume information also.
Yeah.
I'll just do it because I know it.
No, I agree with you. So I think that there's enough clients for everybody here. We are such a big country that like there are foreigners coming and investing here. There's so much of money to be made here, and I think like there is so much of like clients for everybody, and that's one of the reasons. Like for example, even if you see me and Shreyas, we are in complete contradicting this thing. Like we actually do the same thing. But still, like if you irrespective of whatever, like he has given me so many shout outs, he doesn't care about all those things. And a lot of people actually don't. So I think if you are comfortable with where you are, primarily your whole ideology should be to share information. You should make it as accessible as possible. Restricting it is not a good way for anybody. So I really think it's just like people have to change their mindset, like share more things, build a community. See, think about this. There is no one place for all the actually good coaches in India to come together. Be it from bodybuilding, be it from powerlifting, be it from weightlifting. Like if you see abroad, there are so many conferences, so many seminars that happen that brings all these people together. And it becomes a huge learning place, right? You see people presenting different papers, their experiences, and everybody learns from each of these things. But there's nothing like that happen in India. And it is not because there are not good coaches. Like I know for a fact there are so many good coaches here. Like they don't come out. A lot of good coaches don't like social media. They don't want to put the time to make good content. But I know for a fact there are many coaches here who would like blow all these people out of the water. But still, I think someone has to take the effort in bringing all these people together and like, creating that community. Hopefully, someone does it. One of us does it sometime. Maybe I don't know. Hopefully, it happens soon.
Yeah, actually, we are trying to do this from bringing the podcast to the people. Actually, we are inviting all these guests to like share their opinion on some sort of bodybuilding, powerlifting, or any other variation of exercises.
Yeah. Like if you see everybody, right? Like people who have been in the industry, they work like who've been working a long time. They're not biased.
Mhm.
Like like I don't hate powerlifting. I respect powerlifting. Like same thing. Like powerlifters don't hate bodybuilders. Like it's just this like because there's a lot to learn from everybody, right? Every practice has a lot to learn from and contribute to the other practice. So I think we just have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I get it, bro. Like people, like
And
in the
so,
beginning, they hate everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like people hate on CrossFit for unnecessary reasons. Like CrossFit is a sport. It's not. It's like swimming. Like if someone is
Yeah.
doing CrossFit in the gym, that makes no sense. Agreed. But that doesn't make CrossFit bad because of one person who's doing something like which is not CrossFit.
CrossFit as a concept is great, but it's
Yeah.
like overuse of strenuous. It's not good
Exactly.
for like as a
Like
competition type.
100%. Like if you see all the CrossFit athletes, they were all previous weightlifters.
Oh yeah.
There are actual previous athletes. It's not a thing for beginners to go and join. So some people may market it in the wrong way, but it's a sport. It's like tennis or football or whatever. So yeah.
So Gautaman, I wanted to ask you as a coach, and you're providing content on the Instagram or even Facebook or even on YouTube. How can you increase your reach?
Something that even I have to figure out right now. No, I don't. So this is my opinion. I think Instagram is a better platform for putting out a little bit more, I would say more scientific content than YouTube right now, at least in India, because
Yeah,
YouTube
we
has
can say that.
YouTube has kind of driven more towards like entertainment, at least in terms of India. And Instagram, it is much easier to target your audience. Like if you're putting like very constant same type of content, the right people will automatically come and follow you. So I think what you mean by reach is not numbers; it is the type of people that watch your video or the content. And I think for that repetitive same thing, you'll keep doing again and again the same kind of content.
And do you think putting out the content in videos of small length instead of IGTV could have a better effect on the people because they can learn a complex topic in a small amount of time? Or what do you think?
So I tried that. I used to try doing that, but for me, IGTV gave more IGTV was better for me. I feel, but it's very personal. Like I know some people who only do like short 1 minute tutorials, but I think it depends on people to people.
Yeah. So for me, IGTV never worked. For me, the normal post always have been better for interaction with my followers. I usually get around 1 to 2,000 views on my normal post, but on IGTV the views are around 500 to 800. So maybe if I am more consistent with IGTV,
Yeah,
I can get good views on it
I think so.
because
Yeah,
everything ends up with being consistent, right?
yeah, for sure. So, like for example, I after I started putting out IGTV content, I kind of saw my online coaching increase a lot. So that's why I kind of like kept on. So even though you have to talk about the same topics again and again, but I think it's just required. So that's one of the reasons why I'm sticking to it. I think social media is like a very trial and error thing.
Yeah.
I also think that since IGTV videos can take a little longer, if there is informative content, people can implement or let's say invest their time in listening to your opinion or what you're trying to say. But if it's a simple topic, you can get away with infographics or pictures or small. But for example, let's say a tutorial of SBD, a squat bench deadlift. I think it will do better in IGTV than in small posts where you're trying to explain how the technique really is.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with you.
Because nowadays people have like short span of time like to
Yeah,
see videos and stuff.
yeah.
So I guess TikTok is doing well nowadays.
Don't even start that for me. Please.
Fuck.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
How important it is to post about your client transformations on your Instagram?
It is surely very important because that is the one thing that builds trust actually.
Okay.
Because like I think uh, for me what I started putting is like putting conversation screenshots on WhatsApp and all that stuff because that see I think in the end of the day that they're paying money to someone who probably they're never going to meet. So the more sources of trust that you provide, the easier it is for them to hire you. So I
Yeah.
think it is definitely not going to any harm. So why not upload it as well?
Okay.
Nice.
And Gautam, how can a genuine coach grow in a world of clickbaity titles and get fit in? I'm sorry, get slim in 5 days,
Yeah.
increase your height, and all these things.
I actually spoke about this on one of my IGTV videos, right? So maybe if you create such content, you'll get more followers, and you may get more clients. You may get more clients initially, right? But the quality of clients that you're going to get, they're going to be the type of people who will ask you for a refund if you don't reply them on one WhatsApp message. You know,
Mm.
so you attract what you put out, and even if someone else hires, see, in the end of the day, they will have to find someone who's going to actually give them results. So you may not be the first one who's going to get hired, but or after hiring like 2-3 idiots, they'll come back to you. So I think
Because
just stand
yeah,
just stand your ground and create your content. But also I think until and unless you become established in online coaching, you will have to find maybe like a personal training job or something like that, just so like you don't become very desperate and kind of try to resort to these things and say that, what, fuck it, everybody's doing it, let me also do it. Like it kind of puts you in a more comfortable space if you have a constant flow of income coming in, and then you can build this up. So,
and it is very common to see people with their IG pages are full of heavy lifts or having good physique and just photos of themselves flexing, and these people might get more clients to work as a coach, but after a point of time they may realize that it's not
yeah,
the right thing because
exactly.
they're just copy pasting the protocols or anything that's available.
Yeah, for sure. Like this has
Like
happened.
total templates. They just
Yeah,
copy
yeah.
paste the whole template and send it
I
to the
don't know.
clients.
I don't know how you can get away with it. Like, even if you're doing something like do something that you can actually get away with.
I think investing in a coach should be like investing in a company or a stock. You should just not see their performance. You should also see what's the philosophy behind it, how
Yeah,
it actually works. what he actually provides you.
People will
What
understand
is the
that.
returns?
So people will understand that after hiring 2-3 people, but they
Yeah.
will hire you in the end.
Nowadays, they're scared to hire such coaches actually.
Yeah, they do. Actually, they actually do. So
So they don't hire coaches, they just start learning new things by themselves or just give up on this journey totally. I've seen such clients
like who are scared to
who
hire
had
you.
this like who had like bad experiences and they're scared because we provide very cheap coaching, so they are like, okay, we can do this, but we can't like get like expensive coaches now
Mm-hmm.
because we are scared of that.
I understood. Yeah.
Yeah, I think these scams are, very could be easily seen in
Yeah, for sure.
in
Could
the
be.
social in this age of social media. These scams, people are very easily scammed, and people, don't try to retaliate on these terms as well because they don't want to get into any legal,
Mm.
legal thing with police and all. So they are like, if my money is gone, let it be. I don't want to quarrel with them.
Yeah. Like no, like nobody's going to fight over someone for 10,000 rupees from like two different states away. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's how they get away with it. Dude, like there are people who I know have like taken like I've heard stories that like they've gotten payments and immediately after payment is made they'll block them. Not
yeah,
even
actually we have heard the
Damn.
same things.
it's not even giving the program. Like yeah.
Waste
Yeah,
of
also
money.
heard the instances of two different athletes getting two to three five athletes getting the same type of programming, the
Yeah, yeah,
exact.
yeah.
I mean, like
And most
That's bad.
probably this program would have been gotten from someone else or from their coach.
Yeah,
yeah, and they just copy paste for these guys.
I mean, like
that's also
I think it's also the problem of the clients. Like you're paying someone money, you should do your research.
Hmm. I think you should
good
first
point
also
over
talk
there.
with the person,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
see if he really knows what he's talking about,
yeah,
and then you move to coaching aspects.
yeah. Also, like one thing that I've like learned now is like I am I have also gotten a little bit picky about who I hire to train because it just puts you in a very bad mindset. Like when you have to constantly interact with them, right? So the moment someone asks me stuff like like how much can I lose in 1 month or what is the guarantee that I lose in 1 month, I'll be like no, here's my friend's number, you can contact him for coaching. So it's just like that's like one of the it's very negative energy that you want to avoid.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Gautam, one question I wanted to ask you about your coaching.
Yeah.
Let's say you are approached by a client who wants to build muscle or even strength, one of those, and he has a history of 1 or 2 years of good amount of training,
Mm.
not programmed, but he knows what he's doing. Basically, he knows good form on the exercises. So,
Okay.
how would you start with the approach of training him to get stronger or even muscular?
So generally, whenever someone's yeah okay. So whenever I start coaching someone, I make my own maintenance trial. So I find out what their maintenance calories over a course of 2-3 weeks. So
Hmm?
so maybe those 2-3 weeks may essentially be like no result, don't know whatever. But I want to like make sure what their maintenance calories are. So we try numbers, figure it out. And also, second thing that I would start by doing is I would always like if someone says, "Hey, I have squatted," I will still put them on a box squat and ask them to send me form. So I take a very conservative approach when it comes to coaching.
So, how long before you realize like what amount of optimal volume works best for this person and
Two
what
to,
exercises?
2 to 3 weeks,
Okay.
probably 2 weeks.
And after that, you keep on increasing the volume.
Yeah. So generally, generally it will be like 4 weeks of constant increase of volume and 1 week of deload. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. That's generally how we do it.
So, for example, if a person is seeing no signs of any fatigue, but is
Mm.
constantly getting stronger, would you still take a deload or
No, I won't.
just yeah?
I probably won't. But I would generally like recommend a deload after 5 weeks maximum. Like that because there's nothing wrong that's going to come out of it.
What could be the parameters with which you decide if person should take deload or not? Recovery, fatigue, how?
Fatigue definitely, recovery, sleep, and if their numbers are going down. So typically what I ask my clients to do is I share my programs on a Google Drive. So every session they work out, they kind of update their numbers there. So I see how the volume, like their load is progressing or not, and if the load comes down, that's when I know maybe they should take a deload week off.
Okay, so you don't prescribe numbers.
I don't know. I never prescribe numbers. I always
So-
prescribe RPs and make them write the numbers for me.
Oh, okay. And so, what if one sign could be like the weight is going down
Yeah, yeah.
at the same RP or increased RP?
At the same RP.
So, let's say a person in his previous week has done a weight for 9 RP.
Hmm.
You think you should do a deload the next week or just add one set and see how he progresses?
You're talking about someone who's on week 4 or something, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
It depends. Like, see, for example, if it's a very serious bodybuilding client, then I would like put in another week. Or if it's someone who's just general population, I would actually put a deload week on because there's nothing wrong that's going to happen.
Yeah. And so, since we're talking about RPs, can you talk a little about going to failure in training?
Yeah. So I generally ask my clients to go to failure on stuff like things that involve uh, things that are generally single joint movements
Hmm.
and things that require less amount of form. Things like maybe lateral raises or bicep curls, and I ask them to go to failure probably like once a week.
Hmm.
So I'm not very particular about when they should go to failure, but I'll just tell them, once a week, maybe go to failure on your biceps, lateral, on your shoulders or whatever. You pick an exercise that you think you want to do. So once a week, they do any one body part up to failure.
Yeah.
And if it is generally like sometimes if I'm training a bodybuilding client who's enhanced, then it would be in their program. I would specifically mention when he's supposed to go to failure and stuff like that.
Okay. And do you have any, have you noticed any changes when you train a bodybuilding athlete, male versus female?
Female athletes can always handle more volume than male athletes. So that's something that actually is backed by studies as well, because women they have a good temperature regulatory system, so they can actually push more than men. So volume sometimes is higher for women than men.
And what about intensity?
Intensity, like again, same. Their intensity, when it comes to lifting weights, it would be pretty much same. It will be 9 RP, somewhere close to that. But if I'm asking someone to do, like an athlete to do an HIIT session or something like that, then it would be like more for women than men.
Okay. So my last question is regarding nutrition.
Yeah.
So let's say a person is preparing for a powerlifting meet or let's say a bodybuilding, but he's not in his, not in this prep, deep in his prep or in like 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out. He's in
Okay.
his off season.
Okay.
So what could be the nutritional guidelines there?
So this person is in his off season completely.
Off season, yes.
Like if we are, let's say we are on a very comfortable body fat percentage, let's say we'll take it 17% body fat.
Mhm.
So I would do like a maintenance trial and find out where the maintenance calories are, and then I would like probably increase like 200 calories on top of that,
Mhm.
and then like I would keep proteins and fats to an absolute minimum. Sometimes like so generally my protein recommendations are very low, so like I like to put carbs more. So generally, like if someone weighs around like 70 kgs, their protein recommendation will be somewhere on and off season. Their protein recommendation will be somewhere close to 130 grams of protein or 140. That's it, maximum. And then I would actually like put a lot of carbs in. Carbs will be somewhere close to 350, 400, 450 carbs. Will be close to that. And I like to put a lot of carbs intra workout. So if someone is in a bodybuilding prep or something like that on the off season, I would put 1 to 1.5 grams per kg of body 1 per kg of body weight of carbs intra workout through sugars.
So what could be the sources?
It'll be like I generally ask them to take Tang
Okay.
intra workout. It'll be Tang and whey protein intra workout. That's like my typical thing.
And
But do you think the intra-workout carbs help for performance
Glucon-D.
or
Glucon-D, yeah, anything. Tang, Glucon-D, whatever. Maybe if they have that ORS or like some electrolytes if they want, and then it'll be whey protein.
So
Vedant,
Gautam,
go ahead.
I was asking you, what's the idea behind using intra-workout carbs?
See, for example, like you, when you're into bodybuilding, the primary pathway that you'll be using will be somewhere, you'll be using ATPs, you'll be using an immediate energy system, and then you will also want enough glycogen in your body.
Hmm.
So that the whole idea of that is making sure there's more of it coming in.
So that
Yeah.
could be true if he has a good pre-workout meal before gym.
Yeah, that is already there. That's already there. But and also like
So you don't. Yeah.
there's actually a lot of studies that like this is very common among like athletes. So anybody who's doing high intensity workouts, like something that's on high intensity level, like weightlifting or any of the sports, there has been actual proven benefits when they are given like 1 gram of to 1.5, maybe even like 2.2 per kg of body weight of sugars or like of glucose inter workout.
Okay.
Yeah. And do you think those carbs in the off season make the person look fuller, who's his muscle fuller, or just improve his performance?
I am giving it to improve performance, so if it ends up looking fuller, then that's good for him and good for all of us. I think it will because there's so much carbs in there.
So much of
And
glycogen stored in the muscle.
yeah, and do you think and do you plan those carbs, more around the workout and less in the day, or
Yeah.
equal
Yeah.
in?
Yeah. Typically, given that a client is willing to follow all those things, but if someone is eating like 450 grams of carbs, it's very hard to program. You just ask them to get that in a day because it's hard to eat, dude.
Yeah.
Not for
And
me,
just
bro.
sometimes it could be difficult for the person, to consume the given amount of protein in a day. Sometimes, in a week they were, are not able to get in those amount of protein. So what can be the, alternate for that?
I mean, like for me, it has never been a problem because my guidelines are already very low. Like it'll be
Hmm.
140 grams, and it's not that hard to hit 140 grams. But if they say they can't, then like they have to drink it probably, their protein and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But again, there's no hardware on it. They have to suck it up and do it.
Yeah.
That's a necessity, right? So there's nothing we can do about it. So
Protein is very important for MPS as well as recovery.
there's no way around it.
And
But some
what do you
studies have
think of the
showed
use
that.
of sodium or salt, basically?
Yes, just to give you a good electrolyte balance, you need to make sure there's good electrolyte balance for you to hold on to the water that you have and like utilize the water properly in your body. So that's one of the reasons why intra-workout electrolytes are also good because that's
Hmm.
when you may have imbalances and you want to fix it right away.
Yeah, it's one of the
So
main, thing when doing a power up when you do a quarter cut for powerlifting meet. It's
Mm.
also important, besides using carbs, you should also implement using
Yeah,
electrolytes,
sure.
because I think me and Aniket, we have had a fair share of water cuts for powerlifting,
Mm.
and we have seen very good results when we incorporate, salt and potassium, all
Sure. Yeah.
electrolytes. So when a person, when a athlete prepares for a physique competition, what are your salt guidelines? Do you like tell him to leave salt, eliminate salt of his water? So what?
So, like, I don't generally I let them do what they're doing because there's no point in controlling salt so far away out. I just make sure they eat enough of it. But after that, it's kind of auto-regulatory, right? So you have your body is used to the same amount of sodium that's coming every single day. Uh, so probably this varies a lot. Sometimes we don't even have to do a peak week if someone is lean enough, and I feel that let's not fuck it up even further. So then there won't be any peak week. Or sometimes if we think there should be a peak week, it'll be something more along the lines of one day it'll be like on a higher scale, and then we slowly taper down the sodium as we get closer to the show,
Hmm.
and then like one day prior to the show we do sodium loading, like which is we that day is generally something which is like much higher in terms of sodium than what it would be on a normal day. It'll be a lot. Also, there will be a lot of water going in. So it will be like high amount of sodium and high amount of water. And then
So,
on the day of the show, there won't be any sodium at all.
yeah, so sodium will hold that water, and since you will leave the water the next day, all the sodium will also be, releasing the water out.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of to provide like something like it's way higher than the limit, so you kind of it starts exceeding.
I think the water cut for a powerlifting meet also similar, but not to that context. as preparing for a bodybuilding meet.
Yeah, because you guys still have to perform. Like bodybuilders don't perform
Yeah.
on the bodybuilding show. You have to be you'll have to lift weights. So
I have some questions around water cut for you
yeah.
from my personal experiences. But do you think if we have some kind of imbalances before one day of like competition, do you feel some clients of yours have some like vomiting issues?
Yeah, we've had that. There has been.
So how can we cope up with that?
So
Because I have my fair shares of vomit.
no, I'll tell you what happened recently on one of my trips. It's partially my fault and it's partially his fault as well. But again, like, so what happened was I had given him quite an I don't remember the number, quite an amount of water to drink on the day previous night of the show, like throughout on a 16-hour window. So this guy just forgot to drink the entire water and he chucked the entire water in the last 1 hour. So it was something very bad because I was not around. He was somewhere else, and he started feeling very tipsy. He was having like a small headache, and he was alone. Nobody was there, so it was very freaky. So to answer the question, we'll have to figure out why it's happening first. If it's either if it's because there's no water, or if there's too much of water, or if there's too much of electrolytes, and then we kind of balance out accordingly. If it's like too much of electrolytes and less water, then you have to add water and balance it out.
Okay, so I'll give you my experiences. So in Asia competition, I just competed. So what happened in that? I had to cut like 5 kg of water weight basically. So I got like to 104. So now my time is to refeed. So I was like, I'll have one bottle of electrolyte. That's it, and some amount of rice crackers
Mm.
and some sort of a fruit. That's it.
Okay.
So after that, I feel some imbalance in my stomach and like, what the fuck is going on? And start to like, food is coming up. And like, I have to see some place for puking. I start puking all over.
Okay. Shit. Oh shit.
Right after that, my cramps started. Like upper body, chest, lats, and abdomen. Everything was cramping.
Oh, okay. I think so.
What do you think?
I think what has happened there is you kind of loaded your salts too fast.
Hmm.
So I think that's what happened. So I think you kind of loaded your salts too fast, and that's why you puked. But actually, when you puked, everything else came out. So you're still less in electrolytes.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. I think. And that's what I think happened. So
I think because he lost his electrolytes, that's why he was experiencing crampings.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was like sudden spike, and then suddenly like this again. This back to normal. Nothing was there.
Yeah. I think I've
This
had my
happened.
similar share of water cut experiences.
Mm.
The last meet that I water cutted for, it was a small cut. I just lost 2 kgs. It was a small cut. So after weighing in, I just had my water first and then some electrolytes. And after 25 to 30 minutes, I had my carb sources. But I ate carbs so much that I had a sugar crash, and I literally slept for half an hour.
So like,
That's nice actually.
yeah, dude. Like I think like around the time during this times when we coach ourselves, I think we get little tense and we do like stupid stuff. So like it's very common. I feel like even I did one of the same things leading up to my show, where like I was so deprived of all foods that I was walking around and I found this Chinese restaurant that made like make your own wok or something. So then my body started telling me, hey, you want sodium, you need this. Then I started convincing myself and I actually, told Kriti that, hey, I think I'm going to carb up right now. And I went and ordered like some, this is like some 6 hours from the show. I went and had like one whole fried rice. And then I had like one chili chicken and that ruined everything. I became like one water blob on stage. So like, that's when I realized 100% next time I'm hiring coach. So
Coaching 101
yeah, because
mistake.
coaches also count for accountability.
yeah, exactly.
That's the one point, bro.
Yeah.
Accountability is key.
So since you gave
So-
this example of your mishap that happened before your competition, how could person train their mind or just to keep them devoid of this indulging, devoid of their diets?
I don't know because see, like the last show, it was not a mind that gave up. I genuinely believed I needed that. It was
Yeah.
not like it's not like I gave into a craving. at that moment I believe that's what I need. So I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was actually, carving up. I was actually having. So I thought, oh, soy sauce. Soy sauce has a lot of sodium in it. This is what I need. So it was not like I gave him to craving. So I think it is just our body's way of like manipulating us to eat something at times like this. So.
And I think I've seen a few instances of people, after weighings, just gulping out soya sauce, or even
Oh shit, dude.
for sodium in powerlifting meets.
Yeah, I've seen some videos on it. It's
And
very bad.
also, the thing you have when pickle, that pickle juice is there.
Yeah.
It is also, rich in sodium. So people also, I think I saw in last state meet in August, where we three were together.
Bad. I've seen
These are just,
people drinking
strategies
fish
people
sauce.
use.
Yeah. I mean, there are
Fish
some
sauce.
great strategies people use. So. And there are some people
Soya
who
sauce, right?
And there are some people who use no strategies at all. It'll just be like another day for them. So I think
Actually, that's better because
that's better for sure.
you
Yeah.
can't introduce new food. It will be very
Yeah.
difficult for you to digest some sort of foods.
Yeah.
For my athletes, I like don't change anything. Do as you do normally.
That's the right thing to do, I feel.
But I don't do what I say. It's different for me. There I'm like I guess there's where you fail basically as a self-coaching thing.
Yeah, true, agree.
So Vedant, do you have any questions right now, or should we end the podcast over here?
I wanted to ask you more about coaching, Gautaman, if you have time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so how can we work better with an athlete, and how we can communicate better with them? Because most athletes, they don't hold themselves accountable and report to you all those training, how their training went, or how their diet is on point. So how can we communicate better?
I think this depends a lot from athlete to athlete, because I've had kind of the opposite experiences. I've had athletes who are too much into, they should always push. They come from that mentality. Like I've had that a lot, because I generally take an approach when saying like, hey, you know what, it's okay, chill for a while, it's fine. So this is the approach that I generally take, because they're already stressed out. They already have so much of pressure from their other coach, who's coaching them for the sport. That sometimes the best thing for you to do is not injure them. It's really as simple as that sometimes. Like when we have athletes, it'll just be like, they're already been overworked somewhere else. And I can't go and, make the other coach do what I want him to do. So at that point, there has to be some kind of an adjustment that I'll have to make just to make sure the athlete's same. But I think, see, if you get a good athlete, then good athletes already have that kind of mindset where they're always pushing. So that's what makes an athlete, I feel. So.
And have gyms started in your area?
No, dude. Nope.
So do you have any idea or a perspective of how your training will look after returning from this lockdown?
I think I'm going to go do probably like a full body split 3 days a week. After this lockdown, I will start off probably with like 50% of what I've been doing before. That would be a volume, and I'm pretty sure that is enough for me right now. So and then I would slowly, like, I think I can ramp it up fast, but I would start there, like 3 days
to get the body used to basically everything.
Yeah, great. So I think that's it. Aniket, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. Oh, I hope you like to be on the podcast again sometime soon.
It's amazing. I really like this a lot.
Thank you, Gautaman, for being on the podcast. Sada strong raho, guys. This is the end of the podcast. Stay strong. Peace out.